Greetings and salutations, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome once again to the Storyteller's Corner. I'm your host, Joshua T. Calkins Trubergy, also known as Byron of Sidious. And today we're going to be doing a storyteller's perspective, looking into one of my all-time favorite pastimes and hobbies, tabletop role-playing, colloquially and frequently simply referred to by shorthand as D&D, or Dungeons and Dragons. Much like Band-Aid is used as a shorthand colloquialism for bandages or adhesive strips, D&D, or Dungeons & Dragons, has been used as a shorthand for the entire hobby of wargaming or tabletop role-playing, even though Dungeons & Dragons is an intellectual property within the confines of the hobby. There's been quite a bit of hullabaloo blowing up over the last day and a half, thanks to one particular image. Hold on one second. This image. Okay. And I'm going to talk a little bit about this. That's what we're here to discuss today, is this image. This is beyond ham-fisted. Let us begin today, ladies and gentlemen, by pointing out the obvious. It's a day that ends in Y, so it's perfectly fertile soil in which to plant some nonsense in the garden of hobbies and grow ourselves a wonderful, this is not what we needed fruit. And as they have had a long-running track record now of doing, Wizards of the Coast is providing the rather pungent fertilizer for this crop, as they seem dead set on doing since around the year 2012 or so. Yes, I am reading off of a script I wrote before hopping on camera here. The written form is my preference, so. If you've been on X/Twitter in the last 24 hours, you undoubtedly have seen Wizards of the Coast's latest official artwork release, a piece of visual work which is so bacon-wrapped, ham-fisted that Muslims' harami senses should be tingling the world over. Trying to go for, Spidey sense, harami sense. Work with me. If you're not aware of what I'm talking about the image that I showed at the beginning of this video. Feast your eyes upon that, and remember what every Wokey has been caterwauling for the last decade and a half. All art is political. Certainly it would appear that all of your art is, you pack of slavering hyenas. This thing is not just an image put together to promote a new product launch or the continuation of a long-standing hobby property, folks. It is the very essence of propaganda of the LGHD TV variety. Not only that, but there's a beautiful example of Freud's parapraxis, colloquially known as Freudian slip, embedded right in the work, one which I suspect the creator of this visual hasn't had the pleasure of having shoved right in their self-righteous conch just as yet, and allow me to do that in a little bit. For starters, let's not be confused about it, folks. The only clearly identifiable romantic couples in this image are the dancing men in the center of the piece and the female couple in the right corner foreground of the image. Admittedly, the one on the left of that couple in the corner is somewhat androgynous or ambiguous as regards sex, but given the overall tone of the piece in totality, I find it more than reasonable to assume that this is a pair of women who are closer than mere friends. Color theory comprises the majority of the messaging in this piece, and it cannot be ignored even by a visually stunted creature such as myself. Let us begin with the dancing kobolds to the lower right of the dancing men. Specifically, look at the maracas that they're shaking around. Do you notice the stripes on those instruments? Blue, white, pink in combination. The colors of the trans flag. I suppose kobolds in this incarnation of the property are just musical people, eh? Hassan Piker must love them. Observe then the bard, knee-bound in strumming his lute in celebratory serenade of our merry mincing men in center stage. Yes, my language here might rightly be identified as hostile, but do you know what? I'm going to cop to it and admit that, yes, I am being hostile. I'm infuriated that such flagrant propaganda is what the artwork of this time-tested intellectual property has been reduced to. all for the sake of a community that comprises, per their beloved Google, less than 10% of the adult populace worldwide. Think about that, folks. A company which produces a niche hobby product is going after an even smaller niche within that niche and acting as if they can rely entirely on that sliver of a populace to keep themselves afloat financially and creatively. I have news for you, for the folks at the Wizards of the Coast. You can't. The harder you keep shoving this shit in the faces of everyone who isn't in that alphabet community or their sycophantic allies brigade, the harder the pushback is going to be against you. Anyway, back to that bard. What do you notice about the bard? Pink hair, white and blue tunic. Once more, trans colors. How about those buildings framing the mid-area to foreground of the image? Once again, the color scheme on them is pink, white, blue. The same combination we've seen now in the maracas and the bard. As the conventional military wisdom goes, once is blind fate, twice is notable and awakens suspicion, 3 times is enemy action and must be combated. And folks, we're not even done with the visual cues here. There is still more. The warrior facing away from viewers of the image, looking up at the dancing woman in blue. His cloak is white, and his head has a faintly pinkish patina tint to it, and his armor, what little is visible, is also blue. Pink, white, blue. Again. Toss in that the elven woman leaning on a barrel across from him, with a vaguely coy or flirtatious tilt to her hip, is speaking to or looking at a female merchant, and you have yet another same-sex play at romantic inclination. Another chromatic tell is in the form of the beholder, or rather the cutesy abomination of subversion that they're trying to pass off as a beholder at any rate. The colors of its little heart-shaped iris as it looks down upon the dancing men in the center, do you see what they are? Pink, white, blue, again. It cannot be accidental, folks. You can't convince me of that. This whole thing is littered with this shit. In the far-off background, we have a blue dragon rising into the sky, surrounded by white clouds, and a set of arcing rainbow streaks, topped by a clearly darker pink arc. Again, pink, white, blue. Paired with a rainbow, a symbol purloined by the gay community from Christendom, wherein the phenomenon signified God's promise never to drown the world again as he did in the days of Noah and the Ark. The blue dragon is where the parapraxis comes in, and I'd like very much to thank the folks who wrote the lore behind Dungeons & Dragons Blue Dragons for this bit. Blue dragons, you see, according to the D&D lore, are masters of illusion, deception, trickery. They rely on false appearances to ensorcel their prey before striking from ambush and devouring them. I am going to be exceedingly impolite when I say this, but at this point I no longer care for the pearl clutcher's sense of what is insulting. Isn't that what the whole passing thing is among the trans community? About deceiving people about their biological nature? Methinks perhaps the artist subconsciously recognizes this truth and was inadvertently guided to select a blue dragon for this work by way of parapraxis. This is also a community that gives in whole hog to the notion of psychiatry. So, hey, just using your own tools to show you what you're up to. The last thing that I'm going to touch upon right now is the creatures themselves. Between the owlbear, the beholder, and the kobolds. They are pictured here mixing about with the local civilized humanoids as if this is a common everyday occurrence, and maybe, for some homebrewed campaign settings, that might be the case. Sure, hell, even in my own Tamalarian Tales novels, kobolds are a civilized race, but in traditional Dungeons & Dragons, no, they absolutely are not. They are ankle-biting little misfits. Plenty of people have been howling across X already about how this is a game of imagination and creativity. Why are you so concerned with policing it, huh? Well, my dear retarded Anon, many of us are concerned about it because the Standard Bearer franchise, for the hobby as a whole, is blatantly being used as an advertisement for a game about imagination, less so that, and more so as a piece of ideological promotion for anyone who isn't heterosexual or cisgendered. Tabletop role-playing games were birthed side by side or directly from war games, which were about conflict and adventure, not figuring out if Barnaby Bottom's anal-friendly pastries can be purchased at Troon Town's mobile bazaar, and if so, how many can fit in a standard rucksack, okay? Monsters like the Beholder should be razing this town to the ground, turning it into a smoldering pile of slag. This is not Dungeons and Dragons. This is pillow biters and princesses. Cheers.